Welcome to the Love Your Inner Athlete podcast, your go-to source for all things mental fitness and sports. Whether you're an athlete, coach, parent, or professional, you will learn as you join us to dive into inspiring conversations with those who have worked to develop their mental fitness. You will hear from people who've put in the work as either an athlete, coach, parent, or professional. In each episode, we bring you discussions and expert insights on developing resilience, focus, and mindset. Discover the concepts of mental fitness and learn how to use it to create consistent, durable confidence in both sports and life. I'm your host, Hans Schulstead. Let's get started. Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast. I'm Hans Schulstead. Today, we're pleased to be joined by Stacey Kaufmann, founder of the SK Collective, an executive advisory that grows businesses and leaders. Welcome, Stacey.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Well, let's jump right in and let's start with the basics. So tell me about the path to the SK Collective and how you got there.
Well, the path was very unexpected, but really I started prior to the SK Collective. I was in the media industry for a couple decades. When I was in college, I knew I wanted to do something with music or sports, but I wasn't going to be a professional athlete or a professional musician. I did not have those skills. And so I instead decided to figure out what I was passionate about and good at, and then how do I connect it to that industry. And so I ended up doing a internship with the Indiana Pacers, an internship with a company called Emmis, which owned a bunch of radio stations. And what I found was in radio, we got to work with music and sports. They carried the Colts and the Pacers, all that good stuff. So I came up through promotions and marketing and then sales. And then I had kids, and I decided when I went back to work that I wanted to make a bigger impact. And so I went into management and got my MBA, and then went up through the ranks in leadership. And then the last few years as an executive in a media company, managing radio stations and podcasts, events, digital marketing, did everything I wanted to do in the business, and found that some of the traits from being in a 24/7 medium, right, and news stations that are operating and we're live all the time, that after the pandemic, as so many businesses were disrupted, as AI is disrupting and technology is disrupting the economy, tariffs, all these things, that so many of the skills that I was able to really refine in that career in media were needed in other industries that hadn't faced that kind of disruption. Whereas in radio, like since the beginning of time, something was always going to take radio out of business, right? I mean, the 8-track, the CD, the Walkman, satellite radio, like you name it, right? Podcast, but it's still there. It's still consumed by 90+% of the population. And so I realized I had such a great season of life for those decades, but in my next career, in my next phase, I wanted to make an impact in other areas. And so what I saw was the gaps after the pandemic, also in terms of leadership development and just strategic thinking, because so many organizations had to make cuts, right? Lots of cuts were made. Lots of senior executives retired. Lots of junior leaders were promoted. But without the skills, tools, or resources to be successful, they were promoted because they knew how to do the thing. I'm sure you see it a lot of times, like with coaches. They have a really great skill set. They're really good. And so people think they're going to be a great coach, but you still have to figure out how to coach the people. You're not just doing the skill, right? Like you have to be able to work with people. And so I just saw so many high potential people that were promoted, and through no fault of their own, or maybe even their bosses, like their leaders didn't have the capacity to coach them. So management squeeze happened, organizational flattening, really so many people are now doing 3 or 4 jobs. And so the two gaps that I saw were the time for the strategic, really important, but not urgent work. What helps you get out of just surviving into thriving? What helps you have the time and capacity to move the ball forward? Executives and leaders just don't have that kind of time right now, and they don't have the staff to support. So that's really what we focus on at the SK Collective, is just a passion of mine of helping people and businesses grow and move from surviving to thriving.
So how did that, like the 24/7 kind of chaotic demands of that industry shape what you do today?
Well, I think one of the big benefits of being in a 24/7 business is you have to be able to come in and assess a situation pretty quickly and make a quick decision because it's
Mhm,
going to happen fast, right? And
mhm,
so I think part of that is thinking about the fast-paced environment, the limited
mhm,
capacity that companies have to be able to be very efficient at assessing a situation quickly, which is at the executive advisory what we do. I can come in and our team and we can answer a few questions and in it, even in like a half day intensive, like we can cover a lot of ground because you have to learn how to filter information quickly because especially, I'm running 11 radio stations at one time and all the digital stuff that's going on, like it's a constant move. And so I think the adaptability and the quick
mhm,
decision making are probably two of the biggest benefits that I'm able to help coach our clients through now.
mhm.
And also just the fact that like there's going to be a tomorrow, right? Like the lights are still going to be on tomorrow. That we could make the wrong call and the stations are still going to be on, right? We have to make the best decision with the information we have at the
Mhm,
time. And then the
mhm,
presence of new information, maybe we make a different decision. And I think a lot of companies that have been in environments where they're more mature, stable environments, like you see analysis paralysis, or there's a lot of talking. There's like the joke, right? The meeting before the meeting and then after the meeting. And it's like, when do you do the work when all you're in is meetings? Being able to kind of
yeah.
cut all that noise and
Mhm,
just and say, you know what, like we don't have all the information, but with the information we have right now, like we need to move forward. So let's move forward. And then if we get different information, we can make a different decision at that time. I think a lot of companies, a lot of leaders are uncomfortable with that. And it's just a muscle that you need to practice, right?
mhm. So you could say if you made the wrong decision, you got a lot of static, right? Yeah, I've seen that you had to do a lot of tuning in the radio industry, right?
Oh, that's so funny. Yes, we did. You need
Yeah.
to add a little emoji tracker on your podcast. So now we're gonna have a two for you've got two dad jokes in already. I
Oh,
love it.
two dad jokes. Yeah,
I
that
love
that's
it.
true. Well, and a big bandwidth, right? If you're going to
Mhm.
work in radio.
Yes.
So,
Bandwidth is what a buzzword.
yeah,
Oh,
you mentioned music and sports. Did you do both growing up?
I was around music a lot. My dad was a musician. And so, I was exposed to a lot of the classics at a very young age. And so that's something that I was always just thought was so interesting and cool, right? And so I dabbled into music, but I really didn't find my calling there. I think I did the flute for like a year, a clarinet here or there. I did piano for a little bit, but I always just loved kind of the escape and the storytelling of it, right? And just the
Hmm.
energy of that live music environment, which I still love. In sports, I pretty much played every sport there was known to man, I think,
Yeah.
growing up. And the two that I was stuck with the most were basketball and volleyball. And those were volleyball was my favorite sport. Basketball was my best sport, but I was in three leagues from the age of like 7. So by the time I
Oh,
was 18 and I graduated, I was done. I quit. I walked away from potential college opportunities because I was so burnt out and I
huh.
bad coaching experience, which many of us, there's no way that coach could have been coaching today. But it's interesting because it kind of took my love away. And I'm sure
Huh.
that's something that you work a lot with your clients of
Mhm.
learning like how to manage with a difficult coach. But guess what? Like you learn a lot because when you get into the real world, you have a bad boss too, right? Like, the skills that you get from sports are
Mhm.
so transferable to real life. And it's why I'm so passionate about improving the player experience and even with my girls that are in sports and just understanding that it's not just about winning the game or being the best player, but these are the challenges that you have with your team and your teammates and your coach and the refs and all those things. Like those are all immediately transferable into a business environment.
So tell me a little bit about watching your daughters grow up through youth sports and what you learned from that.
Oh, so much. It gave me a different perspective on being a leader, right? Sometimes when you're so close to it, I've been a huge believer in personal development. I've always invested in myself and my career and constantly learning and
Mhm.
growing. And knowing that I spend quite a bit more time in that area, but still, I certainly got it wrong quite a bit. And there's so much that now having been out of it for a year and really being able to have a zoomed out perspective, there's so much I would have done differently. But I think you can look back on your parents and say they were doing the best they could, right? Like they really cared and they didn't get it all right. They were doing the best they could. With watching your kids go through these experiences, one, I think it's natural if you played sports. It's really hard to like not have that PTSD come back of your if you had a bad experience.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
not pushing that on them, right? Or not making that their experience and really being present for their experience could be very different. And we hope it's very different, right? But I think one of the things I've learned a lot, which again, I really took back to leadership, is I have two daughters that are very different. And I think that I'm more evolved in this area than most, and I certainly get it wrong a fair amount. And one of the things I noticed was my oldest child, after a game, wants to immediately dissect everything. Like she wants immediate feedback. She wants to work on it. Like she's just such a driver, right? I started doing that with my second child. And I just saw her like her energy shift and her zone out. I had to realize this is a different kid who doesn't want to talk about the game in the car ride home. And there's so much research, like we know how impactful the car ride
Yep.
home can be, that the best way I could support my younger daughter was not talking about the game for like 24 hours and letting her talk and think about anything else for 24 hours. So things like that. Then you go back to coaching and leadership and just remembering the individualism and to not assume that we know how people are motivated, how they want to receive feedback, like all of these little pieces that can really make an impact on how productive your coaching is.
Okay. Well, and so like when you look back at that time and you think about, changing your perspective, and you mentioned not letting your PTSD come back, tell parents, or if you're comfortable, share with parents how you did that, how you kept that from happening.
So I think it's really trying to be present and remember it's just constantly like hearing this over and over in my head, right? Of this is their experience. This is their experience. And I think so often as parents, like we are so well intended, right? When we see, well intended, one of my daughter's teams last year, like a father who cared so much, loved so much, like you could just cared so much for his daughter. But on the sidelines, he's like screaming at her on the court, and you've got a kid like crying on the court. It's not effective. It's maybe how he was coached. And so part of it is recognizing like some of the ways that we were coached and or parented, et cetera, like we can now look back and say, we probably wouldn't do that today, but it's the best that they could do, right? And recognizing that, but some of those are patterns that we just have to be aware of. But I think the biggest thing was when I realized that my daughter's face and body language had changed after one of those games, to me, I leaned into that moment and I said, do you not want to talk about it? I think asking our kids, like we know our kids so well, but also especially in that 12 to 17 range where their hormones are all, they may be used to prefer this and now they prefer that, right? Or maybe softball used to be their whole life and now like they just want it to be fun. Maybe they thought they wanted to play in college when they were 10 and now they're 14 and they're really not that interested in it. We're still treating it like we want them to be D1 athletes when they don't even want to be a D1 athlete. Are we asking the questions of what does success look like to you this season? Is it like, what are you willing to invest to get that, right? Having realistic conversations about goal setting and accountability, right? Understanding that if you want to be the starter, you're going to have to work and give some things up, right? And the conversation. So I think the biggest thing is just asking and not assuming and being willing to lean into those conversations. For both of my daughters, their goals changed over time and what they were willing to give up or sacrifice for that goal changed over time. Well, then we have to have conversations about what's realistic, right? If you started playing a sport 4 years after everyone else and you want to be a starter, you're gonna have to put in a lot of extra time to catch up. and you may or may
Mhm.
not be able to catch up. Or maybe you don't, like, you just don't have that capacity. Maybe you're at your ceiling. Like, having those honest
Mhm.
conversations, I think, is important. But what I see so often is we still think that their goals are the same. Forget that just like our goals in life change over time, theirs
Mhm.
can too, in a very condensed area. And especially because they're learning who they are, they're growing as people, they're confused about their bodies and their brains and their hormones and all those things.
Yeah.
So I think it's just really leaning into that conversation and being open to it and not putting on
Mhm.
them what we want for them. We might see that they could be a D1 athlete, but if they don't want to do the work for it, or if that's not their
Mhm.
goal, why are we pushing
Right.
them to do that? Then it's about us, not them. And so it just continuing to keep that like record playing in your head of like, this is their experience. I'm here to support their goals, not my goals.
Right.
This is about what's real for them and realistically, what are they willing to do for it?
Right. So, like with your daughters playing volleyball, what you're saying is don't assume their goals are a spike in the ground and be willing to deal with some bumps and set things up differently. I
Look at that. Back to back to back.
feel like my volleyball jokes are out of bounds.
Oh my God. It's so impressive how quickly you can pull those off.
It's one of the things I love to do. That's a state of flow for me is figuring out jokes. So tell me, like, we talked before we started the podcast about some really exciting stuff you're doing in the space of youth sports. So I have two questions for you. One is tell the listeners a little bit more about that. And then the second question is who are some people in the world that you see are taking the lead on, taking the lead in youth sports to change games or change the game and the landscape of youth
Yep.
sports?
So when I went through these experiences with my daughters, I had my own experience years and years ago, before there was the kind of pressure there was now, right? Before there in the club environment, when I played AAU, you made the team or you didn't. There weren't unlimited quote unquote club teams. I can't even imagine the pressure that kids feel now, the business of youth sports and the billion+ dollars that it's becoming in terms of it's really becoming a business, right? And so then there's
Mhm.
challenges that comes with that. And so going through that experience, myself as an athlete who went through burnout, before I had kids, I coached. And so I had that lens. And then now I'm a parent of two daughters going through the youth sports environment. And also, as an executive, I see the later in life benefits or challenges based on kids and their experiences and if they played sports and if they played team sports versus individual sports and all of those things. You see it manifest in the corporate world, you see it manifest in the real world in a business environment. And so I took the coaching, the program that I do on grounded leadership with executives, which is a lot of burnout prevention and recovery, right? And I thought, well, a lot of these are similar to what my oldest daughter is going through. And so I turned it into then what we call the Athena program, but a youth version of that. And the reason is because, my daughter is one of the statistics. 70% of kids are dropping out of sports by age 13. After age 14, girls drop out at twice the rate of boys.
Wow.
93% of female executives played sports, right? And there's correlations between the longer that you play
Mhm.
sports, the higher the index of advanced leadership positions that are
Mhm.
correlated. And
Yeah.
so for me, I was like, wait a minute, time out. If, I'm in an industry where still, 80% of the executives are men, and we're based on these statistics, if these twice the rate of boys dropouts continue, what does that do for our future? What does that do for our future women leaders or their access to it because of all the benefits that we know that they get from sports?
Mhm.
So the Athena program is I developed with those lenses of the athlete, the coach, the parent, the executive, and said, how do we support these kids and reduce the burnout? And the most common reasons for the burnout are, number one is stress and pressure. That pressure is primarily from coaches, parents, and for girls, society. Second
Mhm.
is burnout. And third is access, right? Because of the business of sports, you have to pay to play
Yep.
now. Like your family needs to be able to spend thousands of dollars for you to play competitive sports. And so that access point becomes difficult in socioeconomic situations, right? We built this program that works with schools and clubs on helping support an environment that improves the player experience with the goal of so that the kids are playing longer, right? So that's providing coaching and instruction to the coaches on how to coach the mental side of the game. It's providing coaching to the parents on using an example of me, right? The car ride home and various situations where we think we're supporting our kids, you know, yelling at the refs. I mean, like all those things that we do. One of the surveys that I did with my kids when I was initially beta testing this, I asked a series of questions. And what's one of the ones, one of the questions that your listeners could ask if of their kids, right, is like, what's your favorite way that I show up for you? And what's
Oh, that's a great question.
the way that I show up that you wish I didn't? And it was for me, it was, which I did. Again, it's yelling at the scorekeepers, because in volleyball, usually the scorekeepers are players of a different team and the kids aren't paying attention and they're on their phones. And my youngest, she was like, could you please stop doing that? I had no idea she was embarrassed by that.
Did you get the point?
Oh, there's another one. But like that, what a simple question,
Sure.
right? Like it's available to us. So things like that, right? Giving
Yeah.
parents conversation prompts of we all want to connect better with our kids, and it's all well
Yeah.
intended, but we don't always have the tools, or again, maybe we weren't raised in that environment and things like that. And so based on the curriculum each week that the players are going through, the coaches and the parents are going through a version of that same coaching to support that player. So the player is getting micro lessons from a mental performance coach on whatever the theme is. And each month there's a different theme based on those characteristics that we know will support helping them develop the tools and skills to be more resilient, to have the mental capacity to handle some of these pressure and stress situations. And so everyone's getting, in their own portal, that a version of that to support the player. And so I hired a mental performance coach, and Kelsey is amazing. And she put the sports psychology and sports performance lens on all those things. And, we've just been working on it, for a little bit over a year together and helping clubs and schools improve the player experience and keep playing longer. And then we take 5% of the proceeds and we turn that into the third piece, which is access for underrepresented populations and socioeconomic
Yep.
situations. But really, the whole point of it is in really expanding access to the mental side of the game, which, as you know, not every family can afford to hire you or a mental performance coach one-on-one. And so, and especially in those socioeconomic situations where, they're barely able to get the kid on the, team to fund the uniforms, right? So we wanted to really expand access. So through this hybrid approach of on-demand weekly curriculum that's very simple and digestible, knowing our audiences, right? It has to be very light and simple and digestible, reinforced in practice with a game time situation, and using that, over time to expose them to the idea of mental performance. So it's theory and practice. And then during that season, they have access on demand, via chat and group messaging and discussion to a mental performance coach to ask their individual questions, or in a group discussion to throw questions out to be able to start getting more of an understanding of the mental side of the game, right? We know that we expect our kids to have weight training, but we don't necessarily expect our kids to have mental training. And we know in those game time situations when, it's match point or it's a penalty kick or name your sport, right? It's rarely skill. It's usually mental on whether or not we're successful in that moment. And so whether it's focusing on the actual game outcome or skill outcome, if that's what a parent or a kid wants to focus on, that's great. I know that by doing that work with whatever motivates them, they are more likely to have a better experience and keep playing because of the mental resilience that they're building, which is going to help them on the court and off the court.
Okay. So what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oh, I feel like I'm constantly consuming and learning and growing. The best piece of advice, if I think about like advice you could give your former self, right? One of the things just to just be willing to try thing and that if something doesn't work out, it's not a failure. And I think, a lot of high achieving perfectionists, as I was, and I'm a recovering perfectionist, sometimes we don't put ourselves in that opportunity if we're not sure we can be successful, right? And so thinking about where times or moments where maybe I played small because I didn't think I was ready,
Mhm.
or I didn't raise my hand, or I didn't go for the job, or whatever the thing was. Reality is, what I've learned through my own work and recovering from perfectionism is you don't build confidence by just getting the knowledge. The confidence comes by doing it, right? So while I know Nike has changed their motto, right? But like I just would constantly replay in my head, like, just do it. Like, stop overthinking it. What's the worst thing that can happen? Like, go for the job, try out for the team, whatever the thing is. You're never really going to be right. Just like you're never really ready to be a parent, right? Like you don't know. You have to put
Mhm.
yourself in the game or in the situation, and then you
Mhm.
learn and you get better as you go. But I see like so many people like analysis paralysis, or I need to learn more, or I need more experience. It's like, go for it, right? Like we learn by doing, and you get confidence by doing. You don't get confidence by thinking about it. You actually get typically less confident and more anxious the more you think about it, right? So,
That's true.
like Mel Robbins' 5 second rule, like, let's just go. I think that's the biggest thing that I wish looking back that I would have had more confidence and less anxiety or not enoughness, right? To realize that it's taking messy action. I'm an example of it even the last year. Like, I'm in my mid 40s and like the last year taking action and leaving, turning executive turned entrepreneur and not knowing exactly how to do everything, but taking that messy action, learning quickly from it, being able to adapt. That's why I've been able to grow so fast, right? And so I think that was a huge paradigm shift for me that I think a lot of high achievers and, high achieving kids especially could learn from.
Okay. What's the most powerful book you've ever read?
Ooh. So there's two, I would say. So one is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. That book literally changed my life. High achieving perfectionists. That book I read, I don't know, probably over 15 years ago. And that really changed the trajectory of my life, of how I saw myself, of like understanding myself, like why I was the way I was, like all those things. And it really then exposed me to the value of personal development. Like once I had, that was my aha moment of I can actually grow and learn through some of these things, right? Like I can undo, I can unlearn, I can choose differently. Like, so that I think is just a game changer and still stands the test of time. The second book, in a very different way, is Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Mhm.
I think Atomic Habits is, of all the books I've read about habits and behavior, it is the most actionable, simple, impactful book on how to actually create a habit and make it stick and understanding the science and the psychology around habits and the environment and all of those, really breaking it down to simple. And it really, I think for those of us with ADHD, right, we get bored easily. So it's something that I've always struggled with. I have an incredible amount of work ethic, but I haven't necessarily been the most consistent person, which means I'm not the most efficient, right? If you're not consistent. And so
Right.
having like, I get there through grit and like working my butt off, but there's a more efficient way to do that, which is being consistent with your habits. So
Right.
that book was just such an aha. I had my leadership teams all read it, my sales teams all read it. Like it was just, it's personally and professionally the most like take it and run. And thinking about the environment that you're in, if you're, we all know it, right? But like if you're going on a diet, you're not going to have Oreos in the pantry. And what's the trigger event? So we're focused
Yeah.
on the outcome, but like what happens before that causes the trigger, and being able to identify that in yourself and choose differently is just an incredible book. I highly recommend.
Well, I'm glad you sandwiched Oreos in there. That's one of my great temptations. And I think I would say that Atomic Habits is a book that has had an explosive impact on me. And when you try to implement the habits, you gotta not look at them as a failure and that you're bombing, but more like you're learning. So speaking of habits, what are some of your non-negotiable habits? Things that you have to do every day?
Non-negotiable habits. So that's a great question. Every day, my non-negotiables are one, like this is a simple thing, but like taking my vitamins, right? I take my other, speaking of habits, one of my workarounds for my coffee is, you wake up and you're dehydrated, and then, I grab the coffee and
Yeah.
I'm more dehydrated. So I make myself drink lemon water or some sort of hydrating, electrolyte drink, something before I get my coffee. So my coffee is my reward for doing what I'm supposed to be doing, which is hydrating.
Does the water keep you grounded?
I always, other than that, I have to tell you, like, there's not a ton of things that I do consistently every single day. I move in some way every single day,
Mhm.
but it could be a walk or Pilates or a workout or my new little experiment, which is the vibrating plate. So we'll see how that works. But
What's the vibrating plate?
it's like the new rage that you stand on, and it's supposed to be good for like lymphatic
Oh,
drainage and
that.
all that.
Okay.
And it
Yeah.
shakes,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, they have that at
Um,
Lifetime.
small, and this is the pivot on the habits. It's small and digestible. So if
Yeah.
I like have a crazy day, at a minimum, I can do 10 minutes on that plate, right? Instead of
Mhm.
saying, I'm not going to do it because I don't have an hour to get to the gym, or I don't have to get to half hour. I don't have a half hour to do this workout. So for me, it's like I'm really working on being more consistent, even if it's small moments, because
Mhm.
can very easily get overwhelmed with the bigger commitments, right? I really have to, start my day in a positive mindset. And I
Mhm.
know that that changes, we have the ability to change how we see the world and how we experience things. And starting with a full
Mhm.
cup, one, the glass, then the coffee, right? But then just having that morning reflection,
Mhm.
those are probably the basic things. The one thing I will tell you that like currently that I am working on is digital
Mhm.
detoxing. And that one is still like I'm cracking the code on not being on my phone before bed.
Oh, yeah.
That's a challenging one. We know all the research shows how important it is. I know it impacts my sleep, which impacts all the other things, right? And
Mhm.
so I'm trying to figure out how to do that. And so if I think again about atomic habits, like the answer would be to make my phone out of reach. So that's probably the next thing that I need to do. So thank you
Mhm.
for prompting that push.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, non-negotiables,
Yeah.
meditation,
Oh, that's a good one.
exercise, spending time with my wife. And then I would say the thing that I'm working on right now is like the digital detox and like trying to figure out how to not get stuck scrolling
Hmm.
and getting sucked into a bunch of like media that is unimportant and not losing like 10 minutes of your life or 20 or 45 that you
Hmm.
can never really get back. And then the other non-negotiable for me is when I do go to the gym, I make sure that I always check in and joke around with the staff. And so I'm always trying to build relationships with the staff of places that I go.
Hmm.
I actually always try to tell some kind of a dad joke
I
when
love
I
it.
walk in. Yeah.
I love it.
And it's fun. It's challenging to come up with something new every time because, like my wife says, you're not afraid to beat a joke into the ground. So I have to work to be flexible and come up with different ways. But honestly, that's something that I need. And I think that's important when you run your own business and you're at home, but to be able to have those other kind of relationships in your life and connect with people, I think that's also important is to connect.
I totally agree. It's the best thing of what we do, right? Is being able to connect with others and make an impact. It's interesting. My stepdad, when I was a kid, he used to say hi to everybody, right? Like he knew no stranger. He'd always be driving by, we're at a restaurant, he starts having
Mhm.
conversations with strangers, right? And I thought, like, that's so weird. And then as an adult, I realized, like, how such a simple act could impact someone's day so positively. Like, we don't know what people are going through, and like you acknowledging them and asking them about their day or making a dad joke, whatever, like that can completely change and shift the trajectory of their day, of how they're seeing the world today. And so now I do it all the time, right? And I'm in Northern California. I'm a Midwest transplant. So I'm, hey, and how are you? And, some folks look at me kind of strange, but like I get enjoyment out of it. I understand now why my stepdad did that, right? Of just feeling like it's such a simple thing that we can do. And then the response that you get, right, when someone feels like they've actually been seen or heard, is it's a positive thing that you're doing for someone else. I'm with you 100% on that.
It's just really important to do that, I think, every day.
Yeah.
I have coffee every day too.
Yeah. Yes. Same. I have to. But to that point of me trying to be healthy-ish, I'll say. I'm not like,
Yeah.
I'm on the upper echelon, but I'm not going crazy. But even like I'm putting my collagen in my coffee, I'm taking my amino acids, right? So doing those little things. You would ask me, I forgot to answer this question, about the positive examples I'm seeing in youth sports. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but two examples that I would share. One is I love seeing the work that the Positive Coaching Alliance is doing
Yeah.
and trying to provide more coaching and more of that environment of positive coaching, and thinking the Ted Lassos of the world, like what an incredible example and show and all those things. And then the other, relatively new within the last 2 years, is Youth Inc., which is started
Oh,
by Greg Olson
yeah.
and a former colleague of mine, Tim Murphy,
Yeah.
and a third gentleman who I can't remember his name right now, but he was from Fanatics. And they have started basically this youth media company, if you will. But Greg's podcast I really enjoy and appreciate, because he was a very successful athlete, former Chicago Bear. Now he's a parent and he's like a dad coach, but he is all about resetting. What You Think is doing is, they're providing these platforms, which is great, and helping connect, but really telling these stories and kind of helping open minds and shift paradigms, hopefully a lot for parents and coaches, around like shifting the priorities of why our kids are playing sports and getting back to like, it's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be competitive, but we don't want these kids burning out. We want them having good experiences. And it's not just about, success or failure isn't if you've made it to the pros.
Right.
I think he has some really interesting guests on, but a lot of, one of his first episodes was on the car ride home. So I highly recommend that. I think, opening up more conversations about
It was that he was doing some stuff like that.
Yep. So You Think, Positive Coaching Alliance are two that I follow and think are doing a great job.
Have you followed Changing the Game project?
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, no, that's another one. Changing the Game project. I can't remember the name of the guy who runs it, but like what he talks about, his book, he has a book called The Way of the Champions, and it's all about providing perspective. And he does a lot of trainings. It's a nonprofit. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he's also got some really good stuff about those kinds of things, and
Okay.
talks about that, the different ways that we need to interact and the way that we need to change the games and how we're approaching it and how the adults are handling it. I also think another one that I can think of is, have you read, what's it called? The guy's name is Joe Urban, and he does inside out coaching, and he played in the NFL for a long time. One of his things is that the most powerful religion in the United States is youth sports.
Amen.
And so his whole
Right.
is to make coaching transformational instead of just transactional.
Love
And
it.
he wrote a really good book about his experiences and how his lifelong trauma impacted his performance and his habits and all the different things that he had to learn. And he talks about parenting his own kids through sports. And he played at Syracuse and played with Jim Brown. So yeah, that's also another really good book, and another good, I think it's called Inside Out Coaching. I think as a nonprofit. So,
I love it.
well, the questions, I knew that this would be a deep and rich conversation. Most of the conversations with you are, and I really enjoyed the time we spent at Elite by Choice. And I've actually been rewatching, I haven't gotten to yours yet, but rewatching all the presentations from when I went in 2022. And then when we went, I guess it was last November. So,
Mhm.
okay.
Great chatting with
Yeah,
you.
great to talk to you. See you later.